Avenue, representing several professional sound product lines, such as Yamaha, Marshall, Roland, and Pearl Percussion. And by WRXL 102 FM, Richmond's original home of rock and roll, playing the classics of the 60s, 70s, and 80s.
Rock School is made possible in part by the Digital Musical Instrument Division of Yamaha Music Corporation USA and its network of authorized dealers nationwide.
Does anybody know?
Charlie, pass me one of those picks again.
It's much too early for this, man.
No idea.
Soon.
So I guess he's going to be.
We're supposed to go to the dance
about to start.
Hey
guys, what are you?
Hi, my name is Herbie Hancock, and this is Rock School. Welcome back to Rock School, the series that takes you behind the sounds to see how today's music is made and played. This show is for individualists. It's all about soloing. Everyone loves the spotlight. And as much as playing in a band is a group effort, soloing is always a welcome opportunity for an individual player to shine. The personal expression of each player forms the collective sound of a band, and it's really important to the group effort for everyone to develop their own solo style. Okay, now look, don't misunderstand me. That doesn't necessarily mean grandstanding. There's nothing more boring and tedious to the audience than a display of self-indulgence. But there's no question that the right solo can add a great dynamic to a record, or even to a band's sound. Now, some solos are more improvisational, and some are worked out meticulously in advance. In this Rock School session, you'll learn more about both approaches as they apply to guitar, keyboards, bass, drums, and vocals. We'll also hear from Midge Ewer, James Ingram, Graham Bonnet, and Jan Hammer, who'll each have some tips on getting the most out of these brief moments of glory. Now, let's go solo on Rock School.
Hello and welcome once again to Rock School. In this session we're going to look at an area of playing that presents one of the most exciting challenges a musician can face, soloing.
A solo, of course, is a series of notes, and the notes you choose to play can be derived from a number of different musical sources. We'll be looking at these in more detail in a moment.
But first we're going to look not so much at the notes you play, but how you play them. And for this we need to consider three things: expression, phrasing, and dynamics.
A solo should convey emotion through the instrument you're playing. The problem is how to express that emotion. Now, the main inspiration for instrumental expression is very often the human voice, and the key element in achieving expression and soul in singing is the use of vibrato. Over to Midge.
It is very important, and just when to bring it in is important as well. It's no different from putting vibrato on a guitar notes if you were, if you were playing a... Bringing the vibrato in at the end, there's no point just doing it straight at the beginning. If you want to do a bit of a nice drama. It's the same with the voice. Again, it's actually a forced vibrato. There's very few people have a natural vibrato that would come in time when they'd actually want to feed it in. So you've actually got to create your own vibrato. People with natural vibrators have it constantly, you know, like a Brian Ferry or a Fergal Sharkey. But then they can't actually fade in the vibrato when they want it. It's there all the time. So being able to hold a long note on, like the "Oh, Vienna," and fade in a vibrato, it just helps smooth the note out at the end before it tails off.
I was singing "How Do You Keep the Music Playing" in the for the theme for Goldie Hawn's and Burt Reynolds, and the director came up to me and asked me to take the southernness out of my voice. What he was actually telling me was to take the soul out of my voice. So I sang it like he told me to. How do you keep the music playing? Now when I cut the record, I put the soul in it, which was a little doodads on the end, which was straight to vibrato. How do you keep the music playing? So, those little doodads, you know what I mean? That's my soul, you know.
I use a lot of different voices. I have probably 3 or 4 voices that I use on our records anyway. But I have one voice I haven't used yet, and that's my operatic voice. God bless video. But that's another thing. But on certain songs, like that one we did at the beginning here, the Only One Woman song is like a sob song, if you like. And that always helps if your throat is a little bit tight, because it gives the feeling of someone who's just been crying, if you like, and it gives it that kind of soul feeling. So I remember when I recorded that, the producer wanted me to sound a little rough, such as the Otis Redding, because Otis Redding always had that thing like he'd just been crying his heart out over something, and so it was soulful. So that's one kind of voice that sometimes needs to be a little bit rough.
And I got a picture of the woman I love.
Many guitarists use techniques to emulate the voice in order to get more expression into their playing. Now, a good sustained sound helps, plus you can use vibrato and string bending. Of course, you can always use the tremolo arm for these last 2 techniques, as you'll hear in this next piece. Also, have a listen to what Henry's doing on the bass.
So, as Deirdre mentioned, string bending, vibrato, trills, they're all ways that you can get expression out of your instrument. But on the bass guitar, you have the added and unique ability to be able to play percussion and melody at the same time by using the slapping and plucking technique. Now, in the last tune we played, I was playing the melody by pulling the string and strumming with my nails, like this. At the same time, the bass notes and inner harmony were played with the thumb. So if you put all those techniques together, you're able to play percussion, melody, and harmony all at the same time. Something like this.
So there seem to be three main factors which have an effect on how expressive a note is. How loud or soft you play that note, whether you pitch bend into a note, or what happens to the note after you've played it. Now, pianos, as we saw in Program 1, are very touch sensitive, although you'd have to do some pretty serious DIY on them to get them to do pitch bending or vibrato. But you can simulate the effect of pitch bending by playing off the note a semitone above or below the melody note, like this. The first popular instrument to have added vibrato was the electric organ through a rotating speaker cabinet, and it sounded like this. Synths had to resort to electronic means to get these effects, and until they came with touch sensitivity, you had to rely pretty much on these two wheels for your expression. Now this is the pitch wheel, which simply bends a note up or down, so you can bend into a note, or you can bend a note while it's playing. This is the modulation wheel, which you can use to add various effects, which is most commonly used for vibrato. You could program these effects into your sound so they come up automatically, like this. But you sacrifice the ability to control your playing on the spot. Now, with touch sensitivity, keyboards have become a lot more expressive, as, for instance, with velocity sensitivity, you can control the volume and tone quality of a note according to how hard you play it, like this. Or with something called aftertouch, you can add an effect to a note while it's sounding. Okay, let's play this tune. While we're on the subject of expression, I should mention the most important instruments of all, your fingers. It's well worth equipping yourself with a technique that will allow you to cope with the trickiest of melodies without having to go in for major surgery. Firstly, try to get used to holding your hand in a relaxed position with your fingers curved over at the ends. Think of there being a straight line between your elbow and these finger joints. Secondly, think about your fingering. That's which finger you use to play each note. Basically, the less contortions you have to go through, the better. There are no hard and fast rules about fingering, although it's worth bearing in mind a couple of basic points. First of all, try to avoid using your thumb on black notes, as you'll find this awkward, unless you're playing, say, this chord of F sharp. Secondly, if you're playing a long continuous phrase and you have to tuck your thumb under to play this, do it sooner rather than later, so you don't end up in knots. Otherwise, it's all pretty much common sense, although if you want to improve your fingering, you have to practice some scales. Here endeth the lesson. Now let's look now at a musician who's combined technique and expression to produce a truly amazing style. This is Jan Hammer.
I have this thing that some of you might know. Get the ferrite started here. Surprised how many different instruments I can get that sort of sound on. It's really not a particular instrument or a particular patch. It's more or less something with a sharp attack, with a reasonable amount of sustain, that is going through some sort of a distortion device or an amp. And then it's down to what you play. You become drum guitar player or whatever instrument it is that you hear in your mind for the lead. And it's not just that you're trying to emulate a guitar, because guitar could not do the things that you can do on a keyboard. So you obviously come up with different sequences of notes. And that's where it really gets interesting, because it sounds like a guitar, but something tells you the guitar couldn't do that. We've been talking about the differences between playing at a desk, so to speak, and out in the field. And other than just being, it's got a few more tricks that you have to learn once the keyboard is hanging this way. But the main thing is that it's a whole lot more fun, that you can go out there and just do it.
What can a drummer learn from all this lot? Well, when it comes to soloing, I suppose the drums are a bit different from other instruments. First of all, there's the awful cliche of the band walking off stage and leaving you to it. That is, you've got no backing. Also, of course, you've got no true way of utilising melody and harmony. This doesn't mean, however, that you can't be musical. Apart from being able to exploit the vast tonal and dynamic range of the kit, you can also develop and improvise on rhythmic phrases or motifs, and you can work within a structure just the same as would any other instrumentalist. The following piece is based on variations of a couple of rhythmic motifs, and also I've programmed an accompaniment into the drum machine just to emphasise the structure. Of course, on a tuned instrument, as well as structure, dynamics and expression, there's also the little matter of the notes you play. Now, at its simplest, a solo uses the sort of single-note melodies that we were looking at last time. Based on the tune, the chords, or the scales of the piece, you can either go for it and improvise a solo on the spot, or you can plan it carefully in advance, as does Genesis keyboards man Tony Banks.
First and foremost, you know, I'm a songwriter, and therefore I'm interested in writing accompaniments for my own songs and for other people's songs. You know, that's the main thing I do, really. The idea of playing lead when I first came to the group was I never played lead. I mean, I wasn't really interested in that originally. But then, obviously, once you get the keyboards and you hear sounds, and you start to have played melodies rather than sung melodies. And I always look upon my, you know, whatever kind of solos, call them what you will, more like kind of little sort of instrumentals, if you like. I tend to sort of write them as carefully as I'd write a vocal tune, and that's the melody. And most of the time, you wouldn't improvise much from them.
Now let's look at different ways of improvising. In the last series of Rockschool, we talked about the pentatonic blues scale, one of the most versatile solo voices. It sounds like this. However, if you only play these notes, you might sometimes find it a little bit restricting. For example, on this chord sequence, it's C to G to A minor. You could try playing a natural minor, which is the scale of C major starting on A. If you take any major scale and start on its sixth note, you'll get the relative minor. This idea of playing a major scale starting from a note other than its root note is the key to fresh and inventive ideas for soloing. This uses systems of notes called modes. Now, that relative or natural minor that I just played was also a mode. A mode is a displaced scale. If you take, for example, C major scale and played it 7 times over, starting each time on a different note, you would get 7 modes.
The sound of each mode is different because each has a unique pattern of tones and semitones. Once you've worked out this pattern, you can play them in any key. Now, the names of modes derive from ancient Greek scales, and you can find out more about them in a good book. But for the moment, we're just going to look at 2 of the modes most commonly used in rock, which are the Dorian and Mixolydian. Now, the Dorian mode is simply like playing a major scale, but starting on the second step. If your major scale was C, your starting note would be a D, and it would sound like this. Now, to find out how to use this mode effectively for your solos, you have to know which chord it will fit with. So what you do is take the root, 3rd, 5th, and 7th, and what you get are the notes of D minor 7th. So, a Dorian mode will sound good against a minor 7th chord, like this. The other mode which is used most commonly in rock is the Mixolydian mode, and that's like playing a major scale starting on the 5th step to the octave above. If your major scale was C, your starting note would be a G, and it would sound like this. Now try taking the 1st, 3rd, 5th, and 7th. The notes you end up with are a G dominant 7th chord. Therefore, a Mixolydian mode will sound good against a dominant 7th chord. In the next piece of music, I'm going to solo over the chords of a minor 7th changing to a dominant 7th, using the Dorian and then the Mixolydian mode where appropriate.
Now, to round off this program on soloing, let's look at a technique that allows you to express yourself at great speed. That is using both hands on the fingerboard, as popularised by guitarist Eddie Van Halen. Now, this technique involves using the pick hand to hammer on and pull off, and this is how you do it. Fret a note as usual, and then using the pick hand, hammer on by bringing your finger down firmly on the fingerboard like this. You pull off by bringing the finger away sideways. Now, this is a really good technique to use to build up arpeggios. So, for example, try out A minor. A major. Now, if you pull off to an open string like this, you can bring your pick hand over to change the lower note. Now, using a combination of left and right hand hammer-ons and pull-offs, you can actually create a rippling note effect like this.
You know, it's amazing how influential that solo technique has been. Unfortunately for Eddie Van Halen, you can't copyright your playing style. However, you can help ensure that you will continue developing your own style and ability. So if you stay with us another minute, we'll tell you about some terrific home study materials that go into much greater detail than a half-hour TV program possibly can. For now, I'm Herbie Hancock saying, in the words of Sly Stone, everybody is a star.
Rock out.